Yeah, we will get to the possible candidates for the offensive coordinator position, but let's start with Jeff Lebby's performance. Uh, you're not going to please everyone. Oklahoma could score 50 points a game, and there would be folks that would say, well, we would like to see a couple more passes downfield. There's always the nitpickers. But in regards to Jeff Lebby, came, of course, via Ole Miss with a big reputation. Just your thoughts about how he handled the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jeff Lebby's a great hire for Mississippi State because at a place like that where you have, well, I guess I could phrase it this way. You're fighting an uphill battle to be competitive in the SEC because you don't have the history, the tradition, the lineage of excellence, and the resources that a lot of other programs in that conference do. So you kind of got to go outside the box. And I think Lebby's offense in the SEC, it's not a complete outlier, right? But it is outside the box relative to what has traditionally been the norm in the SEC as far as offensive schemes and principles go. And so I think it's a good hire for Mississippi State. I know a lot of OU fans had beef with the way that Lebby piloted the Oklahoma offense through his 2 years as offensive coordinator. I did not. I think when you look at the hand he was dealt and what he was able to do with it, being part of Oklahoma attaining double-digit wins in year 2 of the Venables era, which certainly was commensurate with the highest expectations that anybody had for OU heading into the season. You look at the statistics, you look at the performance of a guy like Dylan Gabriel, the emergence of the wide receivers, the balance that the Sooners were able to cultivate down the stretch when they found an answer at running back. Was he perfect? No, nobody is, right? Coaches make mistakes just as players do, but I was very pleased, very impressed with the way that Jeff Lebby ran the Oklahoma offense as the sole play caller. And, certainly having covered OU on a full-time basis for some time now, Lebby's a guy that I've gotten a lot of firsthand experience interacting with, somebody that I've grown to admire as a football mind, and obviously wish him the best at Mississippi State. Again, that job comes with challenges I'm sure he's aware of, but he's somebody that if he's able to surround himself with the right people down in Starkville, they'll have the opportunity to win games.
Absolutely. And now we look at an opening and we can get to some candidates. But before we do, of course, the standards are extremely high. This has been a high flying offense basically for 20 plus years now, since the days of Josh Heupel himself. Then, of course, certainly Jason White, and it really took off from there. Do you think, sometimes we see when there's a replacement made that they go an opposite direction if there were failings in that head coach or coordinator position, but when things were relatively clean, good, when he had, Dylan Gabriel on the field, do you think that they will probably stay in that same lane in regards to style and approach?
I know that is their preference, Mark, and it ultimately is going to come down to a lot of factors in the search. Who's interested, how much money you can spend, what the timeline is for each of these candidates, right? There's so much to consider, but I think it's worth noting, as you said, over the last quarter century, Oklahoma has not made a bad hire at offensive coordinator. The one guy who was fired was Josh Heupel. You see where he's at as a coach these days. I think most would acknowledge that whatever shortcomings he displayed at Oklahoma were not indicative of his ability. They were indicative of an inability to live up to an exceedingly high standard that had been established in the 15 years prior. Now, I know a lot of Oklahoma fans would like to see a guy that has called plays before. They would like to see a guy with some experience, preferably at the Power 5 level, that has a history dialing up top flight offenses. The thing is, I don't think that's a prerequisite. Heck, I look back to 2000, the last time Oklahoma won a national championship. They did it with a first-year play caller in Mark Mangino. So the Sooners have one of the best athletic directors in the country in Joe Castiglione. Some would say the best. And when you look at the hires he has made over the years, not just in football, but across all sports, he has a reputation for consistently delivering the right person at the right time. And Obviously, Venables as the head coach is going to have a ton of input on this hire. There will be other folks that have a ton of input as well. But Joe Castiglione seems to have that Midas touch over the years where whoever he tabs, they end up being golden for the University of Oklahoma. I expect nothing different regardless of who the offensive coordinator ends up being.
Brent Venables, you of course know personally. I don't. He seems to come across as a guy who's a really good balance of being a people person, but a nuts and bolts football guy, because there would be some people that I would think, okay, they are simply going for who's laid out the best results, period. And I want that guy. I want to go for the guy that's going to give us the best offensive production. There'd be other head coaches that would lean a little bit more. I got to work with this guy. This has to be a right fit from a personality standpoint and approach, leading young men, just a culture fit. Where do you think Brent Venables stands on that meter?
Well, I think Venables is, how can I put this? He's a guy that trusts his intuition. And I think the perfect example of this was when just about 2 years ago at this time, I think today is the 2-year anniversary of Lincoln Riley announcing his departure. But 2 years ago, when Venables was building out his first staff at Oklahoma, one of his very first hires was Miguel Chavis as defensive ends coach, a guy that he had worked with at Clemson, but that had never before been an on-field assistant at any level. And so that was an out of the box hire. And it was one that many folks looked at and kind of cocked their heads over, right? Because a place like Oklahoma, you're generally not getting a guy that young who is that inexperienced relative to other candidates that could be in the mix to be an on-field assistant when you only have 11 of those slots on a given staff, right? And so Chavis's hiring was met with plenty of surprise, I would say, by fans and pundits alike. But in the 2 years since, Chavis has proven to be invaluable to this Oklahoma program, both for his recruiting acumen, the way that he connects with players, not just his own, but pretty much any member of the locker room. And he has certainly developed a reputation as somebody that knows ball, knows the game, and the players that he is teaching on a day-to-day basis, the players he's sharpening, they respect his input. They respect him as a leader and as a coach. And all in all, that hire has been darn near an A+ for Brent Venables. And so regardless of who the offensive coordinator is, I think as long as Oklahoma makes the decision to go with a guy, maybe not the guy, but a guy that Venables is comfortable with, I think Venables is going to trust that his read on that particular individual, whoever it may be, is accurate, is straight on, and that's somebody that's going to be able to raise the bottom line for Oklahoma football.
We've got Parker Thune here to talk Oklahoma football. Much going on. The Sooners, of course, wrapped up the season with a 69-45 win over TCU, await a bowl bid. And, of course, more importantly, an offensive coordinator position needs to be filled. You can catch Parker at KREF Sports each and every Monday through Friday, 12 to 3 Central Time. OU Insider as well at Rivals. So the list of names, we could go on and on. We could grab about 5 or 6 here. You got Seth Luttrell, Matt Wells, Sean Lewis, Andy Ludwig, Cliff Kingsbury, and again, others. We could go on and on. Many of those obviously have ties to the program, either currently, in Matt Wells' case, or in the past. Any particular guys stand out to you as either you think they're probably headed in this direction, or you think they should be headed in this direction?
Well, I'll tell you this, Mark, based on some of the early conversations I've had regarding this vacancy, and look, it's been less than 48 hours since Lebby officially accepted the Mississippi State job and was announced as their head coach. So it is still very, very early on in this process, but the intel I have as of this moment would suggest that the Sooners are going to try to keep this in-house. Now, whether or not that happens is a different matter entirely. Again, there are a million factors to consider when you're hiring for such a consequential position as offensive coordinator. But you have 3 strong candidates in-house that I would rank probably as follows. Number one would be Joe John Finley, Oklahoma's tight ends coach, and a guy that has worked on the same staffs as Lebby for years. The first order of business is convincing him not to follow Lebby to Mississippi State, which, based on some of the intel I've gathered, seems he has a preference to stay at Oklahoma, assuming the Sooners can make it worth his while with a raise. I'm sure would help. Additional responsibilities would help as well. And that's one guy that Lebby, on his way out the door, apparently vouched for and said, hey, if you want to keep things, if you want to maintain continuity here, Joe John Finley is a guy that I would trust to run the offense here at Oklahoma. So he's got the Lebby stamp of approval. He's a guy that has been regarded across the industry the last few years as somebody that is on the precipice of making the jump to being an OC and has those capabilities. So as far as in-house candidates go, I would actually rank him slightly above Luttrell as far as likelihood. Luttrell obviously comes from that Mike Leach coaching tree, somebody that has been a play caller, has been a head coach, has been in the coaching profession for upwards of 2 decades now. So he's been around the block. He was relieved of duty last year as North Texas's head coach, came up to Oklahoma to join the staff as an off-field analyst. He's a strong candidate as well. I think with Matt Wells, his background coaching quarterbacks gives you some flexibility there, because if they were to promote Finley to being the primary play caller, you could slot Matt Wells in as your quarterbacks coach, because in losing Lebby, you not only lose your play caller, you lose your quarterbacks coach as well. If it's Luttrell, then you kind of have some conflict there, because Luttrell has only ever coached running backs and tight ends. So who coaches quarterbacks at that point, and how do you fit them onto the staff? That becomes the question if it's Luttrell. If it's Finley, you just say, okay, Matt Wells, you coach quarterbacks, leave it at that. Or if you wanted to hire Wells as offensive coordinator, give him that promotion, you could go that route as well. Now, as far as external candidates go, I think the ones that I am watching would be Andy Kotelnicki at Kansas, a guy that has gotten the best football out of Jalen Daniels, that's for sure, over the last couple of years. And that Kansas offense has soared to new heights. Now, he has a long history with Lance Leipold. So is he willing to bolt on Leipold? I don't know. I would question that. So that's why I'm not terribly confident in that one. Willie Korn is a guy that played at Clemson back in the day, so has ties to several OU staffers. He has had nothing but success as offensive coordinator at Coastal Carolina and now Liberty. He moved with Jamie Chadwell up to Liberty to join that staff and has the Flames sitting at 12-0 right now. So that would be another strong external candidate that I would keep in mind. Now, beyond that, Brennan Marion, the OC at UNLV, he's got quite the market for his services right now. He's up for head coaching positions at places like San Diego State, Oregon State, UTEP. But he's also, I'm not sure whether he is ready to jump at just any head coaching opportunity. I think it would have to be the right one. And so with that in mind, maybe he doesn't take a head coaching job. Maybe he just takes a bigger OC job. Oklahoma and Arkansas are 2 jobs that would make sense for him. He played wide receiver at Tulsa and has coached in the past at Oklahoma Baptist, which is about 45 minutes east of the OKC metro area out in Shawnee. So he has Oklahoma ties. That's certainly a guy to watch as well.
So Jeff Lebby moves on to Mississippi State. Oklahoma awaits a bowl bid. Could the selection of a starting quarterback, first of all, give us a bit of a lean on whether Dillon Gabriel, after working with Jeff Lebby for 2 years, could be moving on to Mississippi State as a possible transfer? And again, any thoughts on who may start the bowl game?
Well, I would imagine that Oklahoma doesn't have a ton of departures prior to the bowl game. If you're looking at a guy like Dillon Gabriel, who, was recruited by Jeff Lebby, played for Jeff Lebby at both UCF and OU, has a 6th year of eligibility if he wants to use it, maybe has desire to reunite with Lebby at Mississippi State. I think Gabriel's enough of a team guy that even if he were to do that, he would stick it out at Oklahoma through the bowl game. I also don't think there's anybody on this OU roster right now that has good enough draft stock to be able to sit out the bowl game. Now, maybe right tackle Tyler Guyton is the lone exception. He's been mocked as high as the first round by some experts, but I know internally the thought is he won't quite end up with the draft grade that he thinks he will at this point. So I know they're trying to convince him to come back. They'll certainly convince him to try and play in the bowl game, but I don't think you're dealing with a situation like maybe you were a year ago where Oklahoma had 2 tackles that were early round draft picks and everybody knew it. And Anton Harrison, who ended up being a first rounder, and Wanye Morris, who ended up being a third rounder. Those 2 guys opted out. But you look, for instance, at a guy like Marvin Mims, who was taken in the second round by the Denver Broncos. He played in the bowl game. And that's because the Oklahoma culture is strong these days. And a lot of these guys are, they have the right influences within this program to not do the selfish thing. And look, sometimes the selfish thing is what you feel like you have to do, right? For Anton Harrison, again, he was getting drafted in the first round regardless. So do you want to run the risk of tearing an ACL or something like that? No, it makes a lot of sense for that guy to sit out. But if you're not sure that you're going to be a first round pick, and trust me, there is nobody on this Oklahoma roster that can be anywhere close to certain about that, even Guyton, then I think the culture is strong enough at Oklahoma that they're going to be able to keep the nucleus together for this bowl game, whatever it may be. I mean, obviously the Alamo Bowl is probably the likely landing spot right now, but depending on how things go this weekend, Oklahoma could backdoor their way into a New Year's Six.